Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. We are at Unacademy Manzil 2024, a flagship event of Unacademy for the civil services aspirants. Since we are at the venue, we could have skipped today's The Hindu newspaper analysis. But the four of us decided to do it right here at the venue because we want to honor the promise that we made to all of you, that we shall provide exam-oriented analysis of current affairs, which is uninterrupted and uninterruptible. The four of us will be taking today's The Hindu newspaper analysis. I will discuss two topics related to Indian polity. Chethan sir would discuss four topics related to international relations. Mukesh sir, two topics, one each for geography and environment and ecology. And Abhishek sir would be discussing two topics, one related to economics and the other related to the society of India. And since we are at the venue, we can't wait to see you live with us at 1:30 p.m. today on UPSC Unstoppables by Unacademy, which is another YouTube channel that focuses on English medium civil services aspirants. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, and let's look at a newspaper article on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper related to Indian polity. Kerala governor clears 5 bills passed by the Legislative Assembly. And to understand this newspaper article, I will give you a brief context. Constitution says there shall be Council of Ministers with the Chief Minister at the head to aid and advise the governor, who shall act on that advice, except when the governor has to act in his discretion. So every advice given by Chief Minister and Council of Ministers is binding on the governor, except when the governor decides I have to act in my discretion without the aid and advice of the Chief Minister and Council of Ministers. But the problem is, what are these discretionary powers of the governor? Constitution does not define them. But Constitution does say that if there is a doubt as to what constitutes the discretionary powers of the governor, the word of the governor shall be final. Similarly, one area in which we see misuse or alleged abuse of the discretionary powers of the governor is with respect to Article 200 of the Constitution. When a bill is passed by the state legislature, it is sent to the governor for assent. What are the options available with the governor? One, the governor can give his assent, which means the bill is passed, it becomes a law. Or the governor can withhold his assent, which is what we call absolute veto, which means the governor publicly declares that I'm not going to sign this bill. The bill is dead, it can never become a law. Or what the governor can do, what you call suspensive veto. The governor can send the bill back to the legislature for reconsideration. But if the same bill is passed again, the governor has no other option but to give assent to this bill. But listen to me carefully. Governor cannot send a money bill back for the reconsideration of the state legislature. That is not the power available with the governor. But amidst all of this, we saw a tussle between the democratically elected chief ministers, the government, and the governor, particularly in the opposition-ruled states. For example, Kerala, for example, Telangana, for example, Punjab, for example, Tamil Nadu as well. This is where some of these states approached the Supreme Court. And in November last year, the Supreme Court bench, headed by Chief Justice of India, Justice Chandrachud, gave a landmark ruling. What did the Supreme Court say? It basically clubbed absolute and suspensive veto together. Supreme Court said that when the governor withholds his assent, when the governor publicly declares that I'm not going to sign this bill, that does not mean death of the bill. What governor has to do? Immediately, once the governor says I'm not going to sign this bill, the governor will have to send this bill back to the state legislature for reconsideration. And if the same bill is passed again, the governor has no other option but to give assent to this bill. And now, amidst this backdrop, because this was when the Punjab government approached the Supreme Court, and Punjab government's petition led to this landmark ruling of the Supreme Court. And now Kerala governor seems to have passed these 5 bills which were pending with him, which many constitutional experts say should not have been done by the governor because it violates parliamentary democracy. And the Supreme Court has said parliamentary democracy is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. That is what you need to understand from this topic. We'll take up another topic on page number 12 titled FAQ. When does a candidate get elected unopposed? A candidate of the BJP from Surat Lok Sabha constituency got elected unopposed. We have discussed this previously. I'll briefly summarize this news article for you, and I will also clarify an error which is there in today's newspaper. So listen to me carefully. Nagaland is a state which has elected the most number of MLAs who have been elected unopposed, followed by Jammu and Kashmir. And recently we saw 10 MLAs got elected to Arunachal Pradesh Legislative Assembly unopposed. So there is now this trend of MLAs getting elected unopposed. Although this trend goes back to the time when the constitution was enacted, but we have seen there's a spike recently. And now the candidate from Surat Lok Sabha constituency was also elected unopposed. How? Representation of the People Act is clear that if there is only one candidate who remains in the fray, this candidate gets elected unopposed. Because you can file your nomination papers, but then the rules say you also have the opportunity to withdraw your nomination papers. And after that, the returning officer will scrutinize your nomination papers. After that, whoever else is left, there will be a contest. If after this only one candidate is left, this candidate gets elected unopposed. But how did this candidate get elected unopposed? There was a Congress candidate as well. And you would know that I, as a candidate, if I have to contest elections, I can submit 4 sets of nomination papers, just in case if one nomination paper is rejected, the other would get accepted, so on and so forth. This candidate of the Congress submitted 3 nomination papers. But the candidate belongs to a recognized political party. And if you are a candidate belonging to the recognized political party, you need to be proposed by one elector. Which means if I am a voter in any parliamentary constituency of this country, I can contest elections from any parliamentary constituency of this country. Even if I'm a registered voter in Delhi, I can contest election from the Surat constituency. But one candidate, one voter of this constituency has to propose my name if I belong to a recognized political party. And this Congress candidate, he submitted 3 sets of nomination papers. In one nomination paper, his proposer was his brother-in-law. The other nomination papers, his proposer was his business friend. The third proposer was his nephew. And then the BJP candidate approached the returning officer saying this nomination paper should be rejected because these signatures have been forged. And in fact, the nephew, the business partner, as well as the brother-in-law approached the returning officer saying, yes, these signatures have been forged. We have not proposed his name. Then the candidate normally would have been asked to clarify. And the candidate went incommunicado. The opposition alleged that this candidate has been kidnapped, but it seems that he voluntarily tried to stay away from this contest. And all the 8 independent candidates, they also withdrew their nomination papers. That means now there is only one candidate, and this candidate got elected unopposed. But it leads to a larger issue. And what is the larger issue? Nota. So if there is no contest in Surat constituency, you are still depriving the legitimate voters of Surat constituency the right to choose Nota. None of the above. A landmark People's Union for Civil Liberties judgment of the Supreme Court in 2013 directed the Election Commission of India that you have to give this option, none of the above, to the voters. But in case of no contest, in case of candidates getting elected unopposed, the voters of that constituency are deprived of this right to choose Nota as their option. But that's issue number 1. There is another issue. What if, for example, there is no candidate contesting elections. Elections have been notified, nomination papers are to be filed, but nobody is filing the nomination papers. In this case, what happens? The Election Commission will again issue a notification asking the candidates to contest elections. But if second time also, no candidate is filing the nomination papers, the law is silent, we don't know how to deal with the situation. That's issue number 2. Issue number 3. Should it not be that if there is only one candidate contesting the election, Election Commission of India should further extend the date of nomination papers filing so that more candidates are now contesting elections? Just like what happens in government tenders. If there is only one company or an organization submitting the tender, what the government normally does, re-invites the tender so that there are more options. That's issue number 3. Issue number 4. What if we discussed an issue where no candidate is willing to contest the election? What if there is no voter who is willing to vote? That is what we call the election boycott. What will happen in this case? If there are 10, 20, 30 candidates contesting the election, but no voter is coming to the polling station to cast his or her vote, what happens in this situation? This is where it leads to equality of votes. And what is this equality of votes? If at the time of the counting, there are 2 candidates who get equal number of votes, this is where the returning officer gets to decide the winner. So in case of equality of votes, Mukesh sir and Abhishek sir both have got equal votes. Who is the winner? I am the returning officer. I will draw a lot, and whichever name appears, it is as if I have cast vote in favor of that candidate. So if I take this chit and the name of Mukesh sir appears, Mukesh sir is the winner. That is why I am called returning officer. I am returning the winner. So if there is no contest, if no voter is exercising his or her constitutional right to vote, in that case, Mukesh sir, Abhishek sir, both are at 0. I am the returning officer. I will draw a lot, and whichever name appears, that candidate is the winner. That is what you need to understand from these 2 topics related to the world of Indian polity. Chethan sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Before I start, I had a question.
Yeah.
I read in the article that Nota is often referred to as a toothless tiger. So what is your opinion on that?
There was a petition in the Supreme Court some time ago that if in a constituency the highest number of votes are polled in favor of Nota, then there should be a re-election. The Supreme Court in that case said election is a costly affair, it will lead to a massive expenditure, we should not do this. But now a couple of days ago, the Supreme Court has sent a notice to the Election Commission of India asking the views of the Election Commission of India on this matter. What will happen if Nota gets the highest number of votes? But we have not seen more and more voters opting for this choice of Nota. And this is where we need an interesting reform. Instead of calling it Nota, maybe we should call it not B. In the sense of none of the above, it should be none of the below. Because the first option available to a voter on an electronic voting machine should be Nota, so that it becomes easy for this voter to press the button. That's what we can say can be a reform in Nota.
Thank you, sir. So now let's talk about 4 important articles.
And just to interrupt, in today's article, there is also a mention of Rule 49 capital O of Election Conduct Rules 1961, and there seems to be an error in this article. And what is the error? There was Rule 49 capital O in the Election Conduct Rules 1961, which basically talks about I am refusing to vote. For example, I am a voter. I approach the polling booth. My credentials are verified that yes, I am the registered voter on this constituency. I fill the form as well. I get the ballot paper as well, or I get the slip. Now I have to vote in the voting compartment. But what if I'm refusing to vote? In this case, my details will be mentioned in the form 17. I will then approach the presiding officer. Presiding officer will take my signature or thumb impression, and the title would be called refusal to vote. So this is where I want to reject all the candidates. Nota is I am not in favor of any of these candidates contesting election. But what if I am against the very concept of election? I think this is not a free and fair election. and I want to reject this entire process. There was this rule 49 capital O in the Election Conduct Rules 1961. But when PUCL approached the Supreme Court asking for Nota, in that very judgment in 2013, the Supreme Court said this Rule 49 capital O is unconstitutional. Why? Because it violates the secrecy of the vote. Because when I am a voter and I am refusing to vote, but then I also have to mention my details in Form 17, which I have to give my thumb impression, my signature, and the presiding officer will say that this comes under refusal to vote, which means my secrecy has been violated. And the Supreme Court said that is violative of Article 19, that is also violative of the secrecy of vote, which should be maintained at all costs. So there is no such rule operative right now called Rule 49 capital O. That's something that you need to take care of. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sarmat sir. So now I'll be discussing 4 important articles from the Delhi edition of the Hindu. 1 from disaster management, 3 from international relations. Let's start with the first one from page number 1. This article says that the centre has finally approved the release of disaster response funds to the states of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Now this issue was a long pending issue because last year, for example, Karnataka was hit by severe droughts. Tamil Nadu was hit by multiple disasters including cyclones and floods. So the argument of these 2 state governments was that they are running out of the state disaster response funds and they were petitioning the centre asking for additional funds from the NDRF. An interministerial team had been sent by the Home Ministry, which is the nodal ministry to deal with disaster management. The interministerial team also had recommended the release of additional funds from the NDRF to the SDRF. But however, the centre held on to the decision and did not release these funds to the government of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. The allegation was that since these were opposition ruled states, that the centre was playing politics and holding back the release of funds. Eventually, the state governments approached the Supreme Court and finally the centre has approved the release of funds even before the Supreme Court could pass a judgment on this. So in this context, let's understand the Disaster Response Fund, which is a very important part of the Disaster Management Act. If you look at the DM Act of 2005, we have section 46 that talks about a response fund. Now, what do you mean by response? See, during a disaster, there would be a need for urgent funds to deal with the contingency. That is, to provide for search and rescue operations, to provide for immediate compensation, or to provide for first aid and other assistance to the victims of a disaster. So for this purpose, the DM Act provides a response fund, and there are 2 types of response fund. A National Disaster Response Fund or NDRF at the level of the central government, and a SDRF, State Disaster Response Fund, at the level of the state governments. Now, according to the DM Act, states have the primary responsibility to deal with a disaster. So, initial funds during a disaster is drawn from the SDRF because states are leading the search and rescue operations, providing the immediate assistance and the compensation. The NDRF is more like a supplementary fund which supplements the SDRF funds if the SDRF funds are exhausted by the state governments. So, if you look at SDRF, there is a funding ratio here. The centre provides 75% of the funds into the SDRF in case of general category states. The centre provides 90% of the funds to the SDRF in case of special category states, such as the border states and those states with a hilly terrain which are more prone to disasters. For example, northeastern states, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Jammu and Kashmir, then Himachal Pradesh. So they get 90% of the funds into SDRF from the centre through the budgetary allocation, and Finance Commission also plays a role here, provides recommendations to the centre regarding the allocation of these funds into the SDRF. The remaining balance in the SDRF is raised by the state governments through their budgetary allocation. The NDRF funds, which is at the level of the central government, the funds are mobilized by the centre through taxation and through budgetary allocation. So NDRF fund, which is a supplement to the SDRF, comes into picture when states are facing multiple disasters in a year and they're exhausting the funds in the SDRF. So states do have a right to ask the centre for additional funds or supplementary funds when they are running out of funds in the SDRF. The DM Act says that states can approach the centre asking for additional funding. But however, it's not mandatory for the centre to meet the demand of the states. So what the centre does is that the Home Ministry, which is the nodal ministry, it will appoint an interministerial team, The team of officials will visit the disaster affected state, they'll carry out an assessment on the ground and submit a report along with its recommendations to the Home Ministry. So now the final decision is left to the central government under the Home Ministry to decide whether the additional funds should be provided or not. So usually when it comes to states which are ruled by the same party, which is also in power at the center, there has been a trend where the funds have been easily released. But when it comes to opposition ruled states, we have seen this trend where the center usually holds back the decision of releasing these additional funds. So that is what leads to this political controversy, and Karnataka, Tamil Nadu had approached the Supreme Court as well on this matter. Now finally the center has accepted the recommendations of the interministerial team and has released almost 3,700 crore rupees, large chunk of it which will go to Karnataka to deal with last year's drought situation, and a part of it for Tamil Nadu to deal with the floods and the cyclone that hit the state last year. So this was about the first article. Now let's look at the second article from page number 10 that deals with India's relations with Oman. India and Oman are working out a trade deal, and this could be a transformative step as far as our relations with West Asia is concerned. Because Oman is like a gateway to the West Asia region. We are essentially bound by the Arabian Sea, so in a way we are extended neighbors, and Oman is strategically located. It sits near the Gulf of Oman, which opens towards the Strait of Hormuz. So Hormuz Strait is a choke point, and from the Persian Gulf, all the critical oil supplies on which India is dependent upon passes through the Hormuz Strait via the Gulf of Oman and then reaches India. So having good trade relations and strategic relations with Oman is absolutely essential for India. And I'm sure all of you know what's happening in this region, be it in Hormuz Strait. There have been tensions between Iran and Israel and even a limited conflict between them. In the Red Sea and Arabian Sea, the Houthis have been targeting commercial ships and the entire shipping channels have been destabilized. So India has major interests here, oil interests, strategic interests, security interests. And India had even gotten access to a key port in Oman, which is the Duqm port. So now India and Oman are taking this relationship further by considering a trade deal which might be signed once the elections are over and once a new government is in place in India. So according to the reports, India and Oman are very close to finalizing this trade deal, which will give a number of benefits for exporters on both the sides. Essentially, there would be tariff reduction. Most of India's exports to Oman would enjoy duty-free access to the market of Oman, especially labor-intensive sectors like gems and jewelry, leather and textiles, automobiles, medical devices, engineering products, even agricultural products. These specific exports from India will enjoy almost duty-free access. So this will not only boost India's exports towards Oman, but since these are labor-intensive sectors, it can create lakhs of jobs in India. Similarly, Oman will also get enhanced market access into India. For example, petrochemical exports from Oman, aluminium and copper exports from Oman to India. They will see a significant tariff reduction, and it is essentially designed to boost the bilateral trade volume. As of now, the bilateral trade is just under $13 billion. So through the trade deal, both countries are hoping to double the trade volume. Now let me tell you why this is very, very significant. It's not just about one bilateral trade relationship. As I told you, Oman is a gateway to West Asia. Oman is a member of a key regional grouping, which is the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Now India has been working out a trade deal with the GCC countries from a long time. But we were not able to finalize the trade deal because of differences on both the sides. But so what India has done in the last couple of years, we have sidestepped the negotiations with the GCC group and we are focusing more on bilateral trade deals with each of the GCC members. For example, 2 years ago in 2022, we signed a free trade agreement with United Arab Emirates, which is one of the most key economies in West Asia region. So now if we finalize another trade deal with another GCC member, that would be a landmark achievement for India. This would further take forward our relations with West Asian powers, which has seen a complete transformation since 2010, when then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited Saudi Arabia and signed the Riyadh Declaration. Since then, our West Asia policy has really transformed and it has been further taken forward by the Modi government as well. Now, let me tell you one last point. This proposed trade deal could be very, very significant vis-a-vis India, China and Pakistan. Because China and Pakistan are also negotiating a trade deal with the GCC group of countries. So if India can secure these bilateral trade deals with individual GCC members, that could give us not just an economic advantage, but a strategic advantage as well. So this is what we understand from this important article. Next, we have two small articles on page 14. One has to deal with Russia-Ukraine war. There are reports that Russia has again started targeting critical infrastructure in Ukraine. In the last few days, it has fired multiple missiles and drones targeting the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. Now, such attacks on critical infrastructure and civilian infrastructure is considered as a war crime under international law. But this is not the first time that Russia is doing this. In fact, many students, they presume that Russia-Ukraine conflict started just in 2022. But actually, the conflict is going on from 2014 when Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. And after that, Russia sponsored a separatist movement in eastern Ukraine, in Donbas region. So this is a long-standing conflict, and we have seen that over the last 10 years, Russia has repeatedly targeted public services and critical infrastructure in Ukraine. For example, it even waged a cyber war a few years ago using ransomwares such as Petya and NotPetya to cripple the essential services in Ukraine. For example, electricity distribution companies, banking infrastructure, such critical infrastructure was targeted by Russian cyber attacks. So this has a detrimental impact on civilian life. It has a huge impact on the economy of Ukraine, and this is treated as a war crime. So now Russia has resumed these attacks. It has been using missiles and drones to target electricity infrastructure in Ukraine. So there are important lessons as well from here for countries like India, because this shows the nature of modern day conflict. Modern day conflict is asymmetrical, it's hybrid, it's no longer just a conventional conflict fought on the land, air and sea. It includes the cyber domain, it includes targeting of critical infrastructure as well. So countries like India, disinformation and propaganda as well to change the narrative in favor of your
interference with democratic
elections as well. So truly warfare has become hybrid and asymmetric, and that is something we can learn from this conflict as well. Now coming to the fourth article. On page 14, there is an article about China-Pakistan defense relations. We know that China-Pakistan have this nexus between them, where they have colluded against India. As they say, enemy's enemy is a friend. Even Kautilya in his Arthashastra talks about the Ari-Mitra equation. Ari should be treated as a Mitra. So China-Pakistan have done that. They see India as hostile mutually. And since 1960s, they have colluded, they have a nexus between them. And China has been arming and enabling Pakistan against India. So according to this article, Pakistan has signed a deal with China to procure the Hongnar submarines, which are considered to be one of the most advanced stealth submarines, which has been designed and developed by China. These submarines carry state-of-the-art weapons. They have advanced stealth features, which means they can evade enemy detection. Plus, they have enhanced range. They carry long-range ballistic missiles as well. So under the deal, China is supplying 8 of these submarines to Pakistan. 4 of them will be manufactured in China and transferred. And what is important is that there is transfer of technology. China is transferring the technology to Pakistan, and Pakistan will construct the submarines on its own at Karachi shipyard. So this is something India should watch out for. Given that we are facing multiple threats across the Indo-Pacific, right? Not just from China, but Pakistan could become a formidable threat, given that our submarine fleet is slightly outdated. Of course, we are expanding our submarine fleet as well through the Scorpion diesel electric submarines, the Arihant class nuclear powered submarines. But when compared to China, we are miles behind, and Pakistan catching up with India is something that could change the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. So these are the 4 important articles. Now I would hand over the discussion to Mukesh sir, who will be discussing some important articles from geography and environment ecology.
And sir, this China-Pakistan deal, is it on cash basis or debt, or is it large receipt from China to Pakistan?
I have to assume that given the situation Pakistan is in, I don't think it would be able to afford the cash. So this has to be debt funded largely through China. And also an important point, as China meddles in India's neighborhood by backing Pakistan or let's say even Maldives, now India has been doing the same in South China Sea. We have recently supplied BrahMos missiles to Philippines. We have very good defense relations with Vietnam. So in a way, India is playing in China's backyard. China has always been playing in our backyard. So that is something interesting to note.
Hello everyone, a very warm good morning to all of you. Now today, we are going to discuss 2 important articles, one for geography and one for the portion of environment and ecology. So first of all, we start with the article which has appeared in page 11, the science section of the newspaper. And that talks about a new research carried out by the geologists from MIT as well as Oxford University, where they found out very certain and specific rocks in the southwestern part of Greenland. Now, ideally, when you think about it, finding any kind of a rock, why should it be important? But that is where we have to concentrate on it. Now, these rocks consisted of some amount of bands of iron within them. And what was unique there? That these rocks indicated ancient magnetic fields which the planet would have exerted as the rocks were formed. And the age when it was calculated, these rocks are around 3.7 billion years old. If you think about it, the planet in itself is around 4.5 billion years old. And the presence of a magnetic field around 3.7 billion years old is very instrumental, because till now, whatever our understanding was across the globe, the understanding was that the entire magnetic field of the planet did come into existence only around 3.5 billion years ago. Now, any time when a rock is created, how is a rock formed? Generally, when you have a volcanic eruption, molten materials come up and these molten materials spread over. Now, before they are solidifying and turning into a rock-like structure, the earth will have its magnetic effect on the rock. So all the various ions, molecules, atoms, etc., for example, for elements like iron, they will align themselves as per the magnetic field of the planet Earth before solidifying. So just taking a look at what was the arrangement and the alignment of those particular atoms, those particular ions, you can be able to gauge the age of those particular rocks. This entire science and the study around it is what we refer to as the concept of paleomagnetism, studying the age of the rocks based upon its ancient magnetic properties. Now, the magnetic field that has been found out, it is very important and very relevant. Why? Because the planet Earth does exist a very large geomagnetic field, what we also refer to as the magnetosphere, around itself. And that is one of the key components why life can survive on planet Earth. If you take a look at the planet like Mars, oftentimes you would have wondered that Mars has got so many evidences of rivers and maybe life could have existed, but now why is Mars in such a state? The reason is very simple there, that there is no magnetic field exerted by Mars, but planet Earth continues to do so. And how does planet Earth exert a magnetic field? Purely owing to its rotation and the fact that the outer core of the planet Earth, which is enriched with iron and nickel, that is in a molten state and that also rotates. So that circular motion of iron and nickel particles, that generates a magnetic field, and the Earth exerts a large magnetic field. Now, what is the benefit of having this research? As I told you that earlier, our understanding was that the magnetic field got established around 3.5 billion years ago. This new research indicates that it would have happened 200 million years earlier, that is around 3.7 to 3.8 billion years ago. As soon as the magnetic field was established, immediately the planet's atmosphere started getting created. Because earlier atmosphere, or what is referred to as the primordial atmosphere, largely consisted of only hydrogen and helium, not sufficient for sustaining life on planet Earth. But then those would be exposed to significant amount of solar energy, solar flares, etc., due to which the entire atmosphere would be stripped off. That has been the case with various different planets like Mars. Now, as soon as the magnetic field got established, means that conditions were significantly sufficient and balanced enough for the genesis of gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, etc., and that could be retained on the planet's atmosphere. And that stability of the atmosphere eventually, in a time span of 400 to 500 million years, led to the genesis of life. So this basically takes us significantly into the aspect of that what are the conditions under which life could have been created on the planet. And this also opens up a new area that life could have originated much earlier than what our understanding has been till now. And for that, the oceanic rocks are being explored. Even the rocks that have been excavated right now, they also are having an oceanic connection. It is postulated that long time back they were under oceans, and presently it is in the southwestern portion of Greenland. So that is the research that has been carried out. In a brief gist, it is basically taking back the magnetic clock of the planet around 3.7 billion years ago, and that is important because that helps us understand the genesis of life. Now, coming to the second article. The second article, which has appeared in the FAQ section, that is page 12 of the newspaper, talks about a report released by World Meteorological Organization. World Meteorological Organization has released a report about the status of climate in Asia in 2023. And as per this report, Asia has been warming up at a significantly almost double the rate as compared to the rest of the world. But that is not the only alarming point. The alarming point is that there is a significant amount of gap which exists in the factor of how the climate is changing and what is the capability of the Asian countries to handle the impact of that climate change. And that has basically been witnessed when you talk about last year you had cyclone Mocha, which was a super cyclone which built up. That was purely because of climate change. In India, we observed huge amount of landslides, flash floods, cloud bursts, impacting a loss in the tunes of around 10,000 to 20,000 crores in the region of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. Recently, we have seen that Pakistan also suffered from significant amount of floods. And as we speak, again, Pakistan and China, they are being impacted by very heavy floods to be followed by a very dangerous heat wave. All of this is purely the impact of climate change. So not only are the Asian countries experiencing climate change quite significantly, but because of the poor economic conditions and not so well developed infrastructure and communication mechanisms, our ability to handle the impact is also very much reduced. So this is an article which can be relevant for your prelims as well as the mains examination. You have to understand who released the report. The report has been released by World Meteorological Organization, and the report is Status of Climate Change in Asia. So that will be all for the two articles associated.
Sir, just out of curiosity, how does magnetism in that sense affect us on day-to-day life, sir?
See, the geomagnetism which is basically created, geomagnetism basically magnetic field exerted by the planet. So it provides a kind of a protective shield for us, right, where the sun regularly discharges very high amount of charged particles. Had that magnetic field not been existent, those charged particles would have ripped away our atmosphere. And imagine if the atmosphere is ripped off, we would be experiencing around maybe 60-70 degrees during the day, and again minus 100 or minus 150 degrees during the night. So life would have been impossible. So that is where the magnetic field not only gives the protection, but also diverts the charged particles from the sun at an angular distance. And that is something which we are studying with our own module now, that is the Aditya L1 mission. So one of the main issues or one of the main purposes of the Aditya L1 mission is to observe that angular deflection. So that will be all for these two important articles. Now I hand over the baton to Abhishek sir to carry on.
Thank you, sir. So this brings us to the last two articles. The first one on page 12, which is FAQ related to an IRDIA regulation, and the last one related to art and culture and society, as Sarmat sir said. So when we talk about these two articles, it's relevant for both mains. The first one, which is more important, which is the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India regulation, which has kicked in on 1st April. So when we talk about insurance generally, India has a very big issue in insurance coverage. Close to 6% of the population comes under insurance. And with this new agenda, which is the IRDAI regulations, which are coming in on 1st April, the government is trying to put in a reform agenda. So before we understand the reforms itself, let's try to understand the three problems which exist, sir. Which is that
firstly, there's a specific waiting time period, which all of us would have seen also with regards to certain conditions which are pre-existing or even diseases which are known to us, and that time period was 4 years. The second issue which we see is that the maximum age at which you can enter into the insurance system as of right now under 2016 regulations is 65. And the last is that if you get a treatment under Ayush, the Ayush Ministry programs, it is not covered under insurance. So therefore, the three major changes which they've made in this regulation, which is coming on 1st April, which has come on 1st April itself, is that firstly, they are reducing the specific waiting period to 3 years from 4 years. And if a doctor has diagnosed you with a certain pre-existing condition in the past 3 years, that time period has also come down from 4 to 3. Second is that Ayush ministry based treatments will now be covered under insurance, and insurance companies have to comply on that. Last but not the least is a most significant one, which is also the emphasis of the article, which is senior citizens, which is that the government is urging, and with these regulations they are arguing that the maximum age should be 99 years so that we can cover the population, a very vulnerable population between 65 to the age of 80-85. Over and above that, when we talk about this article in the general context, it talks about the inertia which is there within the insurance industry with these regulations. But at the end of the day, this may be a very important game changer in this sector. So these are the three major changes which have been introduced through this IRDAI regulation of 1st April itself. Moving to the second article. The second article is an art and culture one and talks about society and talks about the Tiwa tribe itself. Now the Tiwa tribe has a very specific ritual which is constructing dormitories together and also living together. Now in today's world, where there is a nuclearization of family, where there's an argument in which we have this industrial complex that we don't tend to talk to each other, we avoid conversations. The dormitory idea is that it tends to develop a bonding, it's a glue for society, and there's also a certain level of skill development which happens within the community itself. So the article, which has very interesting pictures also, talks about how they come together, build that dormitory and live in it, therefore creating a sense of camaraderie. So the article tries to point out that somehow when we talk about tribal societies, even tribes in India today, they have a way to integrate the identity and the consciousness. So the first article tried to emphasize on the three major changes which happened, and the second one with regards to Tiwa tribe. So Tiwa tribe becomes important for the prelims examination, and this regulation can come under GS paper 3 because this may be a game changer that way.
So one interruption regarding the IRDAI. Now, what is the impact that these changes will have on the functioning or on the impact on the common individual, if you can, please?
So, if you look at the regulations itself, firstly, the 2016 regulations are exclusionary. It presumes that our senior citizens don't need any form of insurance, though we are at the most vulnerable when we are at age. So therefore, firstly, there will be an inertia from the insurance departments that they would not want to ratify these into their policies. However, the government has said that they have given a specific time frame in which they have to. Looking at you and me, firstly, we gain from the 3-year thing, which is that now the specific time period has gone from 4 to 3. And over and above that, our senior citizens gain a lot. So that with maximum age going to 99 in a phased manner, at least our parents, our grandparents have a certain specific coverage and they don't feel vulnerable at an age in which you are already vulnerable to the society. And more than that, if the insurance sector will bring in these reforms, it automatically increases the coverage. We are at a critical stage where we have a very good demographic dividend, and insurance awareness, insurance understanding and coverage needs to increase. 6% for a country like India is actually quite low.
Very low.
For a developed country, it should be in 20-25-30% range.
Minimum.
Thank you.
And it's
Thanks.
not, I think, the insurance companies feel that senior citizens do not need insurance cover. They know that they need it the most.
And yeah, they will claim the most also. They'll claim the most
Factor is
also.
very
But the
high.
best part is the government has not meddled with the premium. It has allowed the companies to charge a higher premium, but at least provide insurance.
Because
those who
65 is the cap at which they
Cap.
can enter. Making it to 99 basically covers everyone.
And we are living in times where society also is changing, where
True,
there
sir.
are instances abandoned. This is where this can be a game changer.
Gives them independence that way.
Right.
So over to you.
That is it for today in our daily newspaper analysis. But I do want to apologize for one thing, that we could not write anything because we could not carry the smart board with us. But we still tried in whatever little way we could to ensure that there is uninterrupted and uninterruptible learning available to you. If you've liked this session, if you've got benefited from this session, please do let us know. Press the like button, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and share the links of these classes with your friends and fellow aspirants. Thank you so much. Have a great Sunday ahead. Goodbye.